San Francisco, California, November 2024. The sky hung low, shrouded in gray mist, and a cold drizzle slipped down the tall glass windows of the 10th floor apartment. Daniel Tran, 38 years old, sat alone in his living room. In front of him was a cup of coffee long gone cold. In his hand, an old brown envelope with no return address. The letter had arrived 3 days ago by post. He nearly threw it away until he saw the handwritten lines scrawled across the back. "If you still remember the boy by the river, come back." Signed, Nam. His chest tightened. Nam. That name echoed like a ghost from a time he had buried so deep he thought it might never surface again. It had been more than 20 years since they'd last seen each other, the last time Daniel had stepped foot in Vietnam. Memories rose like a tide. They had grown up together in a small village on the banks of the Perfume River, just outside of Hue. Back then, Daniel had gone by the name Dot, a mixed-race child, son of an American soldier who had disappeared when he was just 3. His mother raised him alone in a wooden house with a thatched roof, making and selling bon loc at the market to survive. He didn't have many friends. His pale skin and light brown eyes made him stand out, a magnet for whispers and distance. All except for Nam. Nam was the only one who played with Dot. The two boys were inseparable, spending their days along the riverbank, floating paper boats, fishing with makeshift rods, and stealing guavas from the neighbors' trees. One time, Nam had slipped into the river and nearly drowned. Dot had jumped in after him, dragging him out. After that, they swore they'd never leave each other. But one day, a silly fight, over something so small Daniel couldn't even remember what, had ended it all. Nam ran off toward the river in the rain and vanished. His family left the village shortly after without a word. Adults whispered about some accident, but no one ever said more. A few years later, Daniel's mother took him to America. He became Daniel, learned English, slowly forgot Vietnamese, and tried to forget Nam. Daniel clenched the letter. No return address, no phone number, just that strange, simple sentence. "If you still remember the boy by the river, come back." Why now? And how did Nam know he was in America? Who even sent it? He didn't sleep that night. Something in him cracked, something that had been sealed away for 2 decades. Old images flooded back. Laughter, a squeaky bicycle, the little scar on Nam's neck, so vivid it felt like yesterday. 1 week later, Vietnam. Daniel landed at Da Nang Airport on a chilly morning. He rented a car and drove south through green rice fields and dusty roads that led to his old village. The landscape was both unfamiliar and eerily familiar. The village still nestled by the wide river, its waters now flowing slowly like memory. Everything seemed smaller than he remembered. The dirt path had been paved over. His mother's old house was gone, replaced by a 2-story guest house. Daniel walked toward the riverbank. This was where they'd built their sandcastle fortress, where they'd promised to explore the world together. Now it was just a patch of overgrown weeds whispering in the wind. He checked his phone. No signal, no Google Maps, no Facebook. He had crossed into a place that didn't belong to the present. Nam's old house sat at the edge of the village. Abandoned, weather-stained brick, moss-covered roof tiles. The door was shut, but not locked. Daniel pushed gently. The hinges groaned open. Inside was dusty, but not completely deserted. Signs of recent life: a thin mattress, a stainless steel kettle, and a frayed school notebook. He picked it up. On the first page, in shaky but familiar handwriting, "If you still remember me, don't be afraid to return. Memories don't bite." Daniel let the notebook fall to his lap. A wave swelled inside him. Everything he had spent 20 years trying to bury had returned. And somehow Nam was inviting him to step back into their world. Night fell. Daniel found a room at a small guest house 3 kilometers away. The landlady, an elderly woman named Mrs. Biche, paused when he asked about Nam. "You're Dad, aren't you?" she said. Daniel nodded. She sighed deeply. "We all thought you'd never come back." She said no more. Daniel lay on a thin bed listening to the old ceiling fan rattle overhead. Outside, the insects sang in the countryside night. He stared at the wooden ceiling, wondering, do I really want to know the truth? Or are some things better left buried? But something in him whispered that Nam was still here. Not just in the letter, but in the weight of something unfinished. Something waiting to be said. The next morning, village outskirts. Daniel woke early. The fog still clung low across the rice paddies like a memory reluctant to fade. He hadn't slept much. The image of the empty house, the notebook, and that cryptic message haunted him. He returned to the village. The streets were quiet, as if time walked slower here. People looked at him with caution, some recognition, some suspicion. A few older villagers murmured to each other as he passed. At the small roadside tea stall, he ordered a cup of hot green tea. The old man running it squinted at him. "You're not from here, are you?" Daniel hesitated, then in broken Vietnamese, "Toila dat Konbalan?" The old man blinked, then slowly nodded. "The Amerasian boy, you've come back." Daniel sipped the bitter tea. "I'm looking for Nam. He was my best friend. We grew up together." The old man went silent. "Nam's family left after the accident," he finally said. "He was never quite the same again." Daniel leaned forward. "What accident?" But the old man only shook his head. "Ask the teacher, Mrs. Han. She still lives by the lotus pond." Mrs. Han, the last witness. The house was small but neat. A wall of flowering vines crawled up its side. Mrs. Han, his old primary school teacher, opened the door slowly, then gasped. "Dat?" Daniel nodded. "Chow Ko." Her hands trembled slightly as she gestured him in. The room smelled of jasmine tea and old paper. Photos lined the walls, generations of students, some faded, some torn. Daniel saw one from 2002. He and Nam stood side by side in it. He couldn't believe how young they looked. "Nam was the brightest boy I ever taught," she said softly. But something changed that day. Daniel's throat tightened. What happened to him? Mrs. Han hesitated, then sighed deeply. "After you and Nam fought, he went to the river during the storm. There was a landslide. They thought he'd drowned. But 2 days later, he was found, farther downstream, alive, but he wouldn't speak." "Wouldn't speak?" "Not a word for months, then slowly, only strange things. He said someone was following him, that the river had taken something from him. His parents thought he'd lost his mind. Others thought it was guilt or trauma." Daniel sat frozen. "After that, his family moved away. I heard rumors they went south, but no one really knew where." A hidden message. Daniel returned to Nam's old house that afternoon, heart heavy. He walked in circles, retracing his steps. Something tugged at him, urging him to look closer. In the corner of the dusty room, behind a loose panel of the wooden floor, he found something. A small, rusted tin box. Inside, a broken watch. A photo of 2 boys, himself and Nam, covered in water stains. And a single torn page from a journal. The handwriting was shaky. "I saw something in the river that night. It wasn't just water, it was something else. I've kept the secret for 20 years, but I'm tired. If Dot ever comes back, he deserves to know." There was no signature. Just a date. August 18th, 2004. That was the day Nam disappeared. The river returned to the source? At dusk, Daniel walked to the riverbank, the place where it had all begun and ended. The current moved slowly. Golden light shimmered across the surface like memories rising to breathe. Daniel sat on a stone and closed his eyes. He remembered how Nam used to sing, how they used to build dams with their hands, how they dreamed of becoming astronauts or fishermen or anything but poor village kids. Something shifted behind him. He turned. A figure stood beneath the trees. A man, thin, dressed in simple clothes, a scarf covering most of his face. Daniel stood slowly. "Nam?" The man didn't move, but his eyes, those eyes. Daniel took a step forward. "It's me, Dat." The man's voice, when it came, was hoarse. "You came back by the river sunset." Daniel stared at the man beneath the trees. His clothes were worn, his face gaunt, older than it would have been. But the eyes, those deep, searching eyes, still the same? Nam? Daniel's voice cracked. The man nodded once, slowly removing the scarf around his face. A long scar ran from his left temple to the corner of his jaw. Old, faded, but unmistakable. Daniel's breath caught. Nam stepped forward, almost unsure if this was real. I didn't think you'd come. Daniel reached out, gripping his friend's shoulder like trying to touch a ghost. I thought you were dead. Nam gave a tired smile. Part of me was. An abandoned temple. That night. They walked in silence through a grove, leaves crunching underfoot, until they reached a half-ruined temple nestled near the river bend, half swallowed by trees. Nam lit a small oil lamp inside and poured tea into cracked porcelain cups. This is where I live now, he said simply. Daniel looked around. There was barely anything, just a bedroll, a rusted kettle, and rows of old journals stacked neatly. Why here? Why stay hidden all these years? Nam stared into his tea. Because the truth isn't something people want to hear. The night. Everything changed. Nam finally spoke, voice low, fragile like a leaf in wind. The night I ran off, after we fought, I was angry. I stood by the river yelling your name. Then the bank gave way. I fell. Daniel listened, frozen. I blacked out. When I woke up, I was farther downstream, but I wasn't alone. Nam's eyes flickered, haunted. There was someone in the water with me, or something. A man. His skin pale, bloated, his eyes open underwater. He grabbed me. Jesus, Daniel whispered. He whispered a name, not mine, not yours. Just a name I didn't recognize. Then he let go. I swam, I screamed, but no one came. They said you'd gone mad, Daniel said quietly. Nam gave a bitter laugh. Maybe I did, but here's what no one knew. The next day, the body of a man washed ashore. He'd been missing for months. People said he drowned upriver, but I saw him that night, holding me. The secret that ate him alive. Nam stood and pulled a small, water-stained notebook from a hiding spot in the altar. I wrote everything down. Every night, what I saw, what I remembered, what I dreamed. He handed the notebook to Daniel. Inside were pages and pages of erratic handwriting, drawings, river maps, and names, most crossed out. A chronicle of obsession and trauma. Why didn't you tell someone? Daniel asked. I tried, Nam said. My parents thought I was hallucinating. The village priest said I was cursed. I stopped talking altogether. People moved on, but I never could. So you hid. I stayed. Nam looked up. Because I thought maybe you'd come back, and if you did, maybe I wouldn't be the only one carrying this. A deeper truth. Daniel sat in silence for a long time. I don't know what to believe, he finally said. You don't have to, Nam replied. But I needed you to know that I didn't run from you. I ran from what I saw. Daniel rubbed his eyes. His chest felt tight. Why now? Nam looked out toward the dark river. Because I'm dying. Daniel snapped his head toward him. What? Nam shrugged slightly. I don't have long, some kind of cancer. Liver, they think. I never checked. Doesn't matter. Daniel stood up, furious. Why didn't you ask for help? Why just send a letter after 20 goddamn years? Nam smiled, sad. Because I didn't want pity. I just wanted you to know I existed, that I remembered, that I loved you like a brother. And I'm sorry. The silence after that felt louder than any storm. The river one last time? The next morning, Daniel woke on the temple floor. Nam was already gone. He found him by the river, standing knee-deep in the water, looking into the current. Nam! Nam turned, smiling. Do you remember the paper boats? Daniel nodded. You said if we made 1,000, one would carry our wish. Nam pulled a folded paper boat from his pocket. I only made one. He placed it on the water. Daniel stepped in beside him. Let's make the rest together. They stood there, two boys inside grown men's bodies, watching the little paper boat drift. Silent witnesses to time and forgiveness. Nam leaned his head against Daniel's shoulder. You came back, he whispered. Of course I did, Daniel said. You were never just a memory. 3 weeks later, Hue General Hospital, Nam's body had grown thinner, his skin more translucent. The cancer, liver failure in its final stage, was no longer something they could fight. Daniel had insisted on bringing him to the hospital despite Nam's protests. For the first time in years, Nam had slept in a real bed. But each time Daniel entered the room, he saw the same thing in his friend's eyes. Peace. Not fear, not regret. Peace. The letters. One afternoon, Daniel found Nam writing something in a worn leather notebook. Still documenting your ghost stories? Daniel teased gently. Nam chuckled, then shook his head. These aren't for me. They're for you. Daniel looked confused. Nam handed him 3 envelopes. Open them after I'm gone. One today, one on the day you leave, one for a long time after. Daniel didn't want to accept them, didn't want to admit there would be a time after, but he took them. Last words. In the final days, Nam barely spoke. Sometimes they sat in silence, side by side, Daniel reading out loud from old notebooks. Other times, Nam would ask him to hum the silly river songs they used to sing. One night, as rain tapped gently on the window, Nam turned to him. Do you believe in the afterlife? Daniel hesitated. I don't know. Maybe. I hope so. Nam nodded slowly. I think the river is like that. It takes and gives, hides and reveals. Daniel smiled faintly. You always made it sound like a god. Nam laughed weakly. Maybe it is, or maybe it's just water, heavy with memory. He closed his eyes. When I'm gone, don't carry me like a ghost. I won't, Daniel said. You'll always be something else. What? The part of me I almost forgot and found again. 2 days later, the funeral. Nam passed peacefully at dawn. There was no family left. Just Daniel and a few villagers who still remembered the boy with the haunted eyes. Daniel buried him under a banyan tree by the river, the place where they'd once built sandcastles and imagined empires. He placed one thing in the coffin, the photo of the 2 boys by the river, now dried and pressed between glass. Before covering the grave, Daniel whispered, You waited for me. I'll carry that forever. The second letter, day of departure. Back at the guest house, Daniel opened the second envelope. Inside, Dot, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. That's okay. I had 20 extra years I didn't think I'd get. I know you. I know you'll blame yourself. Don't. You were the first person who saw me as more than a poor kid with cracked sandals. You were my only brother. Now that you're back, live for both of us. Visit the river once a year. Laugh, love. And when you forget the words to our old song, make up new ones. I'm not in the water. I'm in your blood. Nam. Daniel cried not with grief, but with an aching kind of gratitude. 10 years later, San Francisco. Daniel Tran now taught literature at a community college. He told stories to his students, sometimes real, sometimes imagined. They called him the River Professor because of how often rivers appeared in his lessons. He kept a photo on his desk. 2 boys, a river behind them, smiles wide with childhood. And once a year, he took a flight to Hue, walked to a quiet place by a banyan tree, and folded a small paper boat. He'd place it on the water and whisper, This is for you, Nam. Then he'd hum the song they once sang, badly out of tune, full of love. The final letter left unopened. He kept the last letter sealed, tucked inside a locked drawer. Maybe for the day he grew old, or the day he finally forgot the sound of the river, or maybe he would never open it. Because some things he now knew were not meant to be finished. Only carried, like a paper boat on a wide, eternal river.